Welcome to the Teach Joyfully podcast, where we talk about all things elementary teaching with some mom stuff thrown in. I'm Lisa Burns, a veteran teacher, teacher success coach, and mom of 5, and I'll be your host. Thanks for joining me today. So today we're talking about how to grow readers, not simply teaching students to read, but helping them to learn to love reading for the sake of reading. So here's how I talk to my kids all the time. You might be a little bit shocked to hear this, but here goes. Turn out that light and put that book away. This is something I really do say all the time to my own kids. Why? Because they are avid readers and simply get caught up in a book and can't put it down, even at the cost of their sleep. Let's face it, as much as I want my children to read, we have to have a balance, so sleep is important too. When my students were in elementary school, they got reading logs from school every year. Every teacher, every year. I can't tell you how often my kids would look at me and say, "Mom, can't I just ask the teacher to see if I can skip it? I read so much, way more than they even require." And I would have to tell them that that was presumptuous, because the reality is these teachers were just trying to do the very best they could for their students. What they didn't realize was students like my kids, who are avid readers, it was just one more thing to do, and it made them hate reading for school. It's hard to imagine that, but it is true. And I know that we're busy trying to encourage reading, but here's the deal. My kids read and love reading. I don't keep track, set timers, or monitor in any way other than to know what they're reading, that it's appropriate, and to take time to talk to them about the books and characters that they're reading about. We enjoy reading, and I read to my own kids as well. Reading logs are just another chore for me and for my own kids. I don't believe in them as an educator. They do nothing to create readers. It just makes for resentful readers. It doesn't actually create a love of reading. We have to work a little harder to do that. So the real question is, how do I do it? How did I grow 5 kids into 5 readers? And how do I do that in the classroom every single year? And how can you replicate that in your classroom? That's the real question, isn't it? Well, to begin with, we read a lot. I know you do it with your students, and you probably read, but you probably need to be reading more than you even think you do. I mean, when I say we read a lot, I mean a lot. We talk about books like old and new friends. Books and characters come up all day long. You might hear conversations like this. "Oh, that reminds me of Miri in Princess Academy when they were escaping out the window." Or, "You sound like Pigeon right now," I'll say to my kids, being so creative and arguing your point. And that's what it looks like in my home and in my classroom. That's how reading infiltrates our entire lives. Once my own kids were able to read a book that they could check out from the library, I gave them a reading light by their bed. They could stay up late a bit if they were going to read. That was the privilege of being a reader. You can create privileges and special hideaways for readers in your classroom. Talking about books like old friends is another strategy. I read all the books that my kids are reading and my students are reading in order to do this. I read every book in my classroom, and I recommend that you do too. It's impossible to know that a book is appropriate for a student if you haven't read it first. That little synopsis on the back is not going to help you. And you really need more information than that in order to be able to talk to students about books and to recommend books to them. Helping students choose books is an essential piece of being the teacher. You really need to understand your classroom library inside and out in order to be able to effectively help students with books. So let's talk about how much I really read to students. I read all day long. We stop throughout the day and take quick reading breaks. It is constant. One year I took over a kindergarten classroom in November. The teacher's husband had been transferred, and so they were moving. So they needed a new teacher. When I came in, one of the comments that I got several weeks later when it was parent-teacher conference time was, "My son or daughter says how much you love books, that you really like to read." And I do. and it came across loud and clear because I read to those students several times a day. I had a stack of books for every week, and we read them all. Students were immersed in reading and literature throughout the day. It's essential, especially in the elementary grades. Something I don't do with my whole class is round robin reading. It simply doesn't do what we think it's going to do. Instead, I want to make the text accessible to all students. So, this is what I do. I read to them if there's something that not all students are going to be able to read in order to access the learning that we need to do with that book. I read the story to them. It levels the playing field. They can all work on the comprehension strategies without worry of being able to read the text. It means that I can use whatever text I want at any particular time in order to teach. I'm not limited to text that students can read. I make it interesting and exciting. I'm silly, I'm weird, I'm memorable. I am that weird, memorable, nerdy teacher, and you can be too in your own way. You need to find your own style and your own reading personality, but you can do it. If you love books, it's simple. Stop and read for no reason other than you want to know what happens in the next chapter of the book that you're all reading together. Choose your read alouds carefully. When I'm reading aloud to students, I always plan ahead where I'm going to stop in the book because I want it to be at an exciting part so the students can't stop talking about it and they're begging me all day long to read a little more because they want to know what happens next. I talk about it and wonder about it with them in the lunch line. I create that tension, that excitement about it so that students are whispering and wondering. Sometimes when I pass them in the hallway, if they're on their way somewhere else, I might say something about the book. I wonder aloud about characters and their motives randomly in the day. A great read aloud is like glue that will bond your students together, them against you and you with them, as they beg for more. For my own kids, I read part of a book and then tell my kids not to read ahead, fully expecting them to. And then I set the book on their nightstand and walk away. They always pick up the book and continue reading, and they laugh the next day and tease me with it because now they know what happened and I don't. For students, you can do the same thing. Tell your students how many copies you have and how many are in the school library as you start to read a new book. They'll check them out and read ahead. And as you read the book aloud, tell them not to get too far ahead. And don't forget to good-naturedly tease them as they do. It makes a world of difference. Every once in a while, I'll just drop everything and say, you know what? I think we should read and let everybody have 5 or 10 minutes of reading time. Let them grab their books and read. Or I might grab our read aloud and just say, hey, you know what? I think we should take a quick moment and get an update on our hero. What do you think? It's like a little conspiracy together. The kids love it. It's so exciting and fun, and it makes reading such a pleasure. Sometimes I read aloud as students are transitioning between things while they tiptoe around from one thing to the next. Or I act like I'm giving in and giving them a win. They're getting away with something. Okay, fine. I'll read to you while you get ready for the next thing. They love it, and they will feel like you're on board with them. Honestly, it's not hard to do. You can squeeze in little bits and pieces like this all day long, and it keeps that conversation going about books, and that's what we really want. It's just coming up with ideas that will work for you, and sometimes that can be hard, but it's about making it fun and seeming desirable in simple ways, not creating more work, just enhancing what we're already doing. As a teacher and a parent, you're in sales. You're selling the benefits and desirability of reading. And if we aren't good salespeople, then our students aren't going to want that product, that book that we're selling. So get in there and sell. Learn how to sell. Speak to their emotions, speak to their hearts, speak their language, and read what they love, not what you want them to experience. Yes, you can and should do that once in a while too, but you want them to be hooked on reading. Read things you know will capture their imaginations that they won't want to put down. Read a variety of genres. You never know what will hook that one child that you haven't been able to reach. But you'll find if you keep trying, the real magic of reading happens in the day-to-day, the everyday moments, all those tiny things that you do that say reading is desirable. Reading is fun. Reading's exciting and wonderful. All those things are important. But there's lots of extra things you can do to build that up as well. So here's a few. Book talks. Having students do book talks, you can do book talks. Selling those books, you can have someone else come in and do book talks. A parent, the school secretary, the principal, anyone you can think of. Have them come in and do a book talk. Do book tastings. They're wonderful ways to have students try out lots of books and have a lot of fun with it at the same time. There's tons of information online if you've not done one. They're wonderful and fun. It's absolutely worth a try. They do take some time, a little bit of work, but they're exciting. And if you do them a couple times a year, it's not that big of a deal. Try doing mystery books. I like to wrap books up in plain brown paper and students can choose it and find out what they're going to be reading next just by accident. It's kind of fun. And for some kids, that's the best thing ever. For other kids, they can't stand it. But it's nice to have that option because you never know who it will appeal to. It can make reading very exciting. When I was young, we went to the library every week. We didn't have a lot of money, and so the library was like this great bookstore that we could have any book we wanted at any time. It was wonderful. So we'd go every week and we'd get to choose books. But my mother always made us choose one without looking. Close your eyes, reach on the shelf, and just pick a book because you never know if that was going to be the next great read. And some of them were duds, but some of them were amazing, and they weren't always books that I would have chosen. So I have students try this strategy as well. Sometimes they start it and they love it, and sometimes they hate it, and that's okay, but they gave it a try and they tried something different. It helps them break out of their comfort zone. Book exchanges can be really fun as well. You can do just a regular book exchange and have students bring some of their favorite books that they're no longer reading and exchange it for something else. You could do cafe events, sitting in a cafe with a beverage and reading. Those are fun. Students love it. It makes reading special and interesting. You know those times when you're getting ready to head into a holiday? It's a perfect time to try a cafe event. Things like that are things that real people do, and you can simulate that in your classroom. I also love Flashlight Reading Day. That's a fun day. It's a great way for students to get some extra reading in. It's exciting and fun. You can even do the little finger lights. Students love them. It's a great way to point to words as they're reading. It makes it exciting and fun. Book clubs are another way that you can help hook students on reading. I know a teacher who every year has parents come in and simulate a book club. She does a fishbowl kind of an event. So parents come in, they already have the picture book, they've read it, they're ready to go. She puts little snacks on the table and they sit down and they discuss the book like a regular book club, pretending all the time that the students are there listening in. Students get a great view of what a book club looks like and sounds like and how much fun it can be. And then they get to try it out themselves. It's such an amazing way to introduce book clubs. Students love it, parents love it, and it really does help students understand exactly what a book club should look like. Having parents come in to read aloud makes reading so much more fun. There's something about a mom or dad coming in or a grandparent that makes that book even more special. Author visits are wonderful too. If you have local authors you can bring in. If not, you can do author visits online with so many authors. It's worth investigating. Consider doing illustrator visits as well. There are many children who love to draw and would love to hear an illustrator talk about the book just as much as the author. You can even do one as a recording. There's lots of authors that have recorded interviews online that you can simply use. It's a great way to get the idea of an author visit or learn more about an author that you love without having to pay any additional cost. But don't give up completely on authors because there are many local authors, I'll bet, who would be gladly like to come and talk to your students if you just do a little bit of research. Better yet, have a parent do some of the research for you. Family reading days are a fun day when families can come in and read. It can be an after-school event, an evening event. It can just be an event in your classroom. Any of those would work, but it makes reading fun. Anything that helps instill reading as being fun and also something that people do even when they're grown-ups is important. Many libraries have therapy dogs for students to read to. Talk to your local library and your principal and see if you could arrange to have a therapy dog come in for students to read to. It's very fun. Students love it. It makes reading even more exciting. I guess the point is that we really just want to make reading as fun as we possibly reasonably can. So let's wrap up just a little bit. You need to be reading to your students a lot, not just a little short time during the day. There should be books involved all day long. You need to be reading to your students a lot, not just during the read aloud time during the day. Use books during your teaching times. When you're teaching language arts, there can be a book involved. Social studies and science, quite often there are books that can go in with that. Maybe it's a poem. Maybe it's a nonfiction article. There's all kinds of ways to bring additional reading into your teaching. There's lots of ways to incorporate reading and poetry and all kinds of things in other subjects as well. Really dig and see how many books that you can incorporate into 1 week. It doesn't have to be just books. It really can be texts. So if you think of it as poetry, nonfiction texts, nonfiction books, all kinds of ways that you can enhance your learning and incorporate reading. One of the things that I recommend to parents is once their students are able to read a book they can check out from the library, that they get a library card and that there's some sort of special privileges for readers at home. As you know, in my home, readers get to stay up just a little bit later because they're going to be reading in bed. It makes reading a little more exciting. They feel like they're getting something special, and you're getting a win because they're reading and you don't have to fight them. You can grab my Growing Readers cheat sheet for parents. It's free. It has tons of ideas for families to make reading fun and desirable at home. They're super simple and they don't cost anything. And they're very powerful strategies that can solidify students as readers. If books are just a huge part of your day and they're just a normal part of everything that you do, then books start to seem like old friends and becoming a reader is just a given. Make it silly, make it memorable, incorporate reading everywhere you can. Incorporate extra moments to read and days when you get extra reading time in. There's tons and tons of ways to sneak extra reading in and make reading fun. There's all kinds of ways to make reading interesting, fun, and desirable. Don't worry, I have all kinds of things in the show notes and in that Growing Readers cheat sheet for you, so it's all there. So that's it, my teacher friends. We're out of time and I'm out of breath. Thanks so much for joining me today. If you liked today's episode, I'd love it if you'd go to Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen and leave a review. And while you're there, hit the subscribe button so you'll never miss an episode. You can continue the conversation online with me through social media and on my website. And you can find the show notes on my website at www.hopeineducation.com/podcast. Remember, a happy teacher is a good teacher. Until next time, teach joyfully and take care of you.